Emily Walker always thought college would be her chance to grow and find herself. Coming from a small, predominantly white town, she had dreamed of attending a diverse university where she could learn about different cultures, broaden her perspectives, and make lifelong friends. When she was accepted into a prestigious university known for its commitment to diversity and inclusion, Emily couldn't have been more excited. But just a year into her college experience, Emily found herself feeling more isolated than ever. The campus she once saw as an opportunity to connect with others now felt like a place where she didn't belong. Emily first noticed the shift during a sociology class discussion on privilege. The professor had asked students to share their thoughts on systemic inequality. Nervous but eager to participate, Emily offered her perspective, explaining how she believed everyone deserved an equal chance at success, regardless of race or background. Her words were met with tension. One classmate, Jordan, a vocal activist, scoffed and said, "It's easy to say that when you're white. You have no idea what it's like for the rest of us." The comment stung. Emily wanted to defend herself, but didn't know how to respond without sounding defensive. Instead, she stayed silent, feeling embarrassed and ashamed. From that moment on, Emily noticed that her attempts to join discussions about race and social justice were often dismissed or criticized. At first, she thought it was just her imagination, but as the weeks went on, she realized that some of her peers saw her as part of the problem simply because of her race. Outside of class, things weren't much better. Emily tried joining a campus social justice group, hoping to learn more and contribute, but she quickly realized that the group wasn't interested in hearing from her. When she brought up an idea during a meeting, the conversation moved on without acknowledgement. At another event, she overheard a group of students laughing about how white people can't handle being uncomfortable. The comment cut deep, leaving her feeling alienated and judged. Emily didn't know how to navigate this new reality. She had always been taught to treat everyone equally and to believe in fairness, but now she felt like nothing she said or did was enough. The university that had promised to be a place of growth and connection was becoming a space where she felt invisible. For the first time, Emily began to question her place on campus and whether she truly belonged at all. Emily tried to shake off the incident in class, but it lingered. She replayed the moment in her mind, thinking about what she could have said to defend herself. Her classmates' words seemed to echo wherever she went, as though they were a reflection of how everyone saw her. She started avoiding speaking up in class altogether, worried that whatever she said would be interpreted as ignorant or privileged. Outside of class, her social life became increasingly strained. Emily had joined the campus social justice group early in her freshman year, eager to support causes she believed in. She had been optimistic about the potential to make a difference, but now every meeting left her feeling more like an outsider. During one session, when she suggested a project to collaborate with a nearby community center, no one responded. The group leader instead praised another student, Jordan, for proposing an idea strikingly similar to hers just minutes later. Emily felt invisible, as though her contributions didn't matter. "Maybe I'm not as welcome here as I thought," she muttered to herself after the meeting, walking back to her dorm. Emily's feelings of exclusion extended to her personal relationships. Her closest friend, Sasha, a biracial student she'd met during orientation, had always been someone Emily could talk to. But lately, even Sasha seemed distant. One evening, as they sat together in their dorm, Emily opened up. "Sasha, do you ever feel like people expect you to act a certain way just because of who you are?" Sasha hesitated, sensing the weight behind Emily's question. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Why do you ask?" Emily sighed. "It's just, I feel like no matter what I do, I'm judged for being white. It's like I don't belong in these conversations about race, but I also feel like I have to prove I'm not part of the problem." Sasha looked thoughtful, but firm. "Emily, I get that you're struggling, but you have to understand, people of color have been dealing with this kind of exclusion for generations. I think what you're feeling is uncomfortable, but maybe that discomfort is part of learning." Emily didn't respond. Sasha's words made her feel guilty for even bringing it up. She wanted to see Sasha's perspective, but it felt like her own feelings were being brushed aside. The tension came to a head during a group project in one of Emily's classes. The assignment required students to collaborate on a presentation about social inequities. and Emily was paired with Jordan and two other students. From the beginning, Emily felt excluded. Her suggestions were met with silence, and the group seemed to move forward without her input. During one meeting, Emily proposed a way to organize their presentation slides. Jordan rolled his eyes. "We've got it, Emily," he said dismissively. "You don't have to take charge just because you think you know better." The comment stung. "I'm just trying to contribute," Emily said quietly, but her voice shook with frustration. Later, as the group walked out of the library, Emily overheard one of her teammates whisper to another, "She's acting like a fragile white girl." Emily froze, her stomach sinking. That night, she couldn't hold back her tears. She felt humiliated, misunderstood, and increasingly isolated. Desperate for clarity, Emily decided to seek advice from her sociology professor, Dr. Patel, who had always encouraged nuanced discussions about identity and privilege. During office hours, Emily hesitantly shared her experience. "I just don't know what to do," Emily admitted, her voice wavering. "I want to be part of these conversations, but it feels like nothing I say is right. I feel like I'm being judged just for being white." Dr. Patel listened carefully before responding. "Emily, it sounds like you're experiencing a kind of exclusion that's difficult to process. That feeling is valid, but I also want to challenge you. Why do you think some of your classmates might react the way they do?" Emily thought for a moment. "I guess maybe they've dealt with a lot of bias or judgment themselves." Dr. Patel nodded. "Exactly. That doesn't mean their behavior is fair, but it does mean there's a context to it. Sometimes, when people feel unheard or marginalized for so long, they can become guarded or even dismissive when they finally have a chance to be heard." Emily left the meeting with mixed emotions. She still felt hurt. But Dr. Patel's words helped her see that the hostility she'd experienced wasn't entirely personal. It stemmed from a broader context of pain and frustration that she was only beginning to understand. At Dr. Patel's suggestion, Emily decided to attend a campus forum on race and privilege. Walking into the packed auditorium, she felt out of place but determined to listen. The event began with students sharing their experiences with racism and discrimination. A Black student spoke about being followed in stores. A Latina student described being told her English was surprisingly good. Each story was raw and emotional, and Emily found herself moved by their courage. When the floor opened for discussion, Emily hesitated before raising her hand. Her heart pounded as she stood up. "I don't really know how to say this," she began, her voice trembling. "But I've been struggling to find my place in these conversations. I want to support change, but sometimes I feel like I'm being dismissed because of who I am. It's hard to know how to help when I feel like I don't belong." The room was silent for a moment. Then Jordan, who was sitting near the front, stood up. "I get that," he said. "But you have to understand, people like me have felt that way our entire lives. If you're feeling uncomfortable, maybe that's a sign you're starting to see what it's like for us." Emily nodded, though his words didn't erase her pain. For the first time, though, she realized that discomfort might be necessary for growth. After the forum, Emily approached Sasha in their dorm room. "I think I'm starting to get it," she said, her voice quiet. "What you said before, about discomfort, I think I needed to hear that." Sasha smiled. "I'm glad you're trying, Emily. I know it's hard, but you're not alone. Just remember, it's okay to feel uncomfortable as long as you're willing to keep listening." Their conversation marked a turning point in their friendship. Emily realized that her struggles didn't negate the struggles of others, and that understanding and empathy went both ways. Encouraged by Sasha and Dr. Patel, Emily joined a campus dialogue group aimed at bridging racial divides. The group was structured to encourage honest conversations, with students from different backgrounds sharing their experiences and learning from one another. Through the group, Emily began to see that her feelings of exclusion were valid, but they were part of a much larger, more complex system. She learned to listen without defensiveness and to contribute without centering herself in the conversation. One evening, during a particularly intense discussion, Jordan surprised her by saying, "I've been tough on you, Emily. Maybe too tough. But I respect that you're still here, trying to learn." Emily smiled. "Thanks. I'm trying to figure it out, one step at a time." Over time, Emily started to feel less isolated. She formed genuine connections with classmates who appreciated her willingness to engage and grow. She also began to advocate for spaces on campus where all students could share their experiences without fear of judgment. One of her proudest moments came when she and Jordan worked together on a campaign to promote inclusive dialogue across campus. They organized workshops, brought in guest speakers, and created a platform where students could voice their concerns constructively. Through it all, Emily realized that belonging wasn't about being accepted without question. It was about contributing to a community with humility and purpose. As Emily walked across the campus quad, the crisp fall air carried the sound of students laughing and chatting around her. It had been over a year since she'd first felt the weight of exclusion on this same campus. But now, something had shifted. She no longer felt invisible, nor did she feel like she had to prove herself to everyone around her. Instead, she felt like she had found her place, not because the challenges had disappeared, but because she had grown through them. Emily's journey had been anything but smooth. The discomfort she had felt during the early days of her college experience was still fresh in her memory. But now, she understood that those feelings were part of a larger process. She no longer blamed her peers for their reactions, nor did she dismiss her own experiences. She had learned to hold both perspectives at once. Her feelings of exclusion were valid, but they were also shaped by a system that had long marginalized others. Her involvement in the dialogue group had been transformative. Every session brought new challenges and revelations. She listened as students of color spoke candidly about their experiences with racism and exclusion, and she shared her own struggles with feeling dismissed or judged. At first, her vulnerability had been met with skepticism, but over time, her willingness to stay engaged began to build trust. One of the most significant turning points for Emily was reconciling with Jordan. The two had clashed early on, their interactions marked by tension and misunderstanding. But through their work together in the dialogue group, Emily began to see a different side of him. Jordan, too, admitted that he had been too quick to judge her. "I guess I assumed you wouldn't care," Jordan told her one afternoon as they prepared for a campus workshop. "A lot of people talk about wanting to help, but don't actually show up. But you stuck around." Emily smiled. "I almost didn't, but I realized I couldn't just walk away without trying to understand." Their shared work became a testament to the power of perseverance. Together, they organized a series of workshops aimed at fostering inclusive conversations on campus. The events attracted students from all backgrounds, creating a space where people could share their stories without fear of judgment. Emily's biggest leap forward came when she decided to write an article for the campus newspaper, titled "Belonging in a Divided World." The piece chronicled her journey of feeling excluded, learning about privilege, and finding a way to contribute meaningfully to her community. In the article, Emily admitted to the pain of feeling dismissed, but also acknowledged the importance of understanding the historical and systemic forces that shape those reactions. "I've learned that discomfort is not something to avoid, but something to embrace," she wrote. "It's through discomfort that we grow, connect, and build bridges." The article sparked widespread discussion on campus. Some students applauded her honesty and courage, while others criticized her for centering her own experiences. Emily anticipated the mixed reactions and welcomed the dialogue. "If it gets people talking, then it's worth it," she told Sasha, who had become one of her strongest allies. Emily's growth wasn't limited to her interactions with others. It also reshaped how she saw herself. She no longer felt the need to prove her worth or defend her intentions at every turn. Instead, she focused on learning, listening, and contributing where she could. One day during a particularly heated dialogue group session, a freshman student shared their frustration about being silenced in class because of their race. Emily felt a familiar pang of recognition, but resisted the urge to share her own story immediately. Instead, she asked, "What do you think would make those spaces feel more inclusive?" The student paused, then said, "Just being heard, I guess." Emily nodded. "I get that, and I think a lot of us, myself included, are still learning how to do that." Her response marked a shift in how she approached these conversations. Instead of centering her own pain, she used her experiences to empathize and build understanding. By her senior year, Emily had become a prominent voice on campus, known for her dedication to fostering inclusive conversations. Her her work with the Dialogue Group expanded into a campus-wide initiative called Voices Together, a program that brought students, faculty, and staff together for facilitated discussions on identity, privilege, and belonging. Jordan became one of her co-leads, their earlier tensions now replaced by mutual respect. During one of their events, Jordan introduced Emily to the audience. "This work wouldn't be happening without people like Emily," he said. "She's shown me, and all of us, that growth is possible when we're willing to listen and stay open." Emily felt a rush of gratitude as she stepped up to the microphone. She looked out at the diverse crowd, reflecting on how far she'd come. "This isn't about one person's story," she said. "It's about all of us finding ways to connect, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." As Emily approached graduation, she often found herself reflecting on her early days on campus. She remembered the sting of being dismissed, the loneliness of feeling like she didn't belong, and the anger of being misunderstood. But she also remembered the people who had challenged her, supported her, and pushed her to grow. One evening, she sat with Sasha on the steps of their dorm, watching the sunset. "Do you ever think about how much we've changed?" Emily asked. "All the time," Sasha replied with a smile. "But that's what we came here for, right? To grow, even if it's messy." Emily nodded. "I used to think belonging was about being accepted without question. Now I think it's about showing up and being willing to put in the work." The night before graduation, Emily attended one last dialogue group session. The room was filled with familiar faces, as well as new ones. During the closing circle, each person shared what they had learned from their time in the group. When it was Emily's turn, she took a deep breath. "I came here feeling like I didn't belong," she began, "and there were times when I wanted to give up. But this group taught me that belonging isn't something you're handed. It's something you build, piece by piece, by being open and willing to grow. I'm grateful for every person who challenged me and every person who listened. You've all made me better." As the group applauded, Emily felt a sense of closure. She had come full circle, not by erasing the pain of her experiences, but by transforming them into something meaningful. After graduation, Emily stayed connected to Voices Together, helping to mentor new student leaders and expanding the program to other campuses. Her experiences on campus had taught her that creating spaces for dialogue was one of the most powerful ways to bridge divides. Though the challenges of exclusion and misunderstanding hadn't disappeared, Emily felt better equipped to face them. She no longer saw herself as a victim of reverse racism or a misunderstood outsider. Instead, she saw herself as part of a larger community, one that was messy, complicated, and worth fighting for. As she stood on stage at her graduation ceremony, surrounded by her peers, Emily smiled. She had learned that belonging wasn't about fitting in. It was about creating a place where everyone could stand together, even in their differences.